Another one of those clash of styles coming up this weekend. A man who's perennially near the top of the card in a young UFC career. We have the natural, not Robert Redford. It's Caio Borralho. He's going to be taking on Abus Magomedov. And Matt, it all depends on when people watch this video. It could be just before or on Halloween. And if it is, happy Halloween. And if it's after, well, you know what? The folks, they probably have a little bit of the loot at home. So I get some Sour Patch Kids here. I got all the Maynard's Greats. Some Swedish Fish if you want them. For our American listeners, Smarties. You know, Smarties.
It's been a while since I've had a Smartie.
Well, then eat some. Go ahead. But for Caio Borralho, to make the references, I mean, Halloween, it's one of those things where you're able to squirrel that candy away. It's a little bit like Shutter Island. It's a little bit like Stairway to Heaven. It's a little bit like the show on Netflix, Midnight Mass. Caio Borralho has been a bit of a slow burn for UFC fans. And why do I say that? Because he's fought 4 times in the UFC. 3 of those 4 fights have been co-main events, including his 2 first UFC fights. Now, the UFC's done a bad job with co-main events, and with Abus Magomedov, they've done a bad job with main events too. But for Caio Borralho, his last time out, it was a co-main event, and he took on Hussar, Michael Olszewczuk. And he got his first UFC finish, and he got a bonus, and he looked amazing. And now all of a sudden, it's not a slow burn. You're right up there. For Abus Magomedov, years ago, people remembered him as that guy, that really flashy striker with the really nice Anderson Silva front kick. And by the way, UFC debut did that against Dustin Stoltzfus. But like years ago, Magomedov, I mean, against Luis Taylor, eating that left hook and going down, eating just untold punishment in the second round on Canada Day against Sean Strickland. And I'm not making this up. My wife, our in-laws, they were over. And our backyard, the trees go down, and off the back deck, you can see downtown a great festive Canada Day fireworks show. As I'm sitting there watching the screen, what did I watch? I watched Sean Strickland get walked down for a round against Abus Magomedov. And then I watched the beginning of a champion, Matt. Abus Magomedov wilted under the pressure and had nothing left in the second round. So I'm a little bit surprised that for a guy that likes to take a lot of time off between fights, that he's back in there so soon after getting clowned in the second round. And I know this sounds really harsh, but Magomedov looked terrible in that second round.
He did not look good.
He looked awful. And I don't normally take that angle. He looked terrible. And for Caio Borralho, this is where it gets interesting. He's such an awkward striker, whether it's from orthodox or southpaw. He's got that long range, almost karate. We already mentioned, or I mentioned Machida in the last fight, training with some big fighters. Borralho looks like a carbon copy. He's a grappler trying to imitate Lyoto Machida. He's got good kicks when he does decide to. He's got really nice odd-angle punches. I don't think that's the way to do it against Magomedov. But we'll see how this one plays out with Magomedov, a UFD staple, training an American top team for this one, and Borralho at his combat club and Fighting Nerds down in Brazil. I think this is a really good fight, a really interesting fight, and a huge buy low spot on Abus Magomedov.
It is a really big opportunity for both guys because if Magomedov is able to go out there and beat Borralho, he does get back into that spot, right? Like, this is by far the best win he's had in the UFC. I'd say you'd rate this over the Stoltzfus win. So for Magomedov, I know he didn't look good against Sean Strickland, but at this point, like you said, we saw the beginnings of a champion.
Israel Adesanya didn't look good against Sean Strickland.
Guess what? You're not your best version when you fight that man, it turns out. Sean Strickland's really good. But the 2 big points I wanted to touch on, I'll circle them back into yours. Magomedov did have a lot of success early on against Sean Strickland, but once that distance started to get collapsed, he didn't have an answer for as many of the boxing combinations of Sean Strickland. Not that Borralho is going to go out there and close the distance in the same way to stay in the pocket, but he could use the takedowns to close the distance and collapse that pocket in a very similar manner. But you bring it up too, his tendency to stand at range is going to open up a lot of the benefits of Magomedov. And if Abus is able to, sometimes he will put his back up against the cage even if he's in a beneficial position, I will bring that up, but if he is able to lean back, really let his kicks flow and throw some of those up the middle shots, not only are they going to hurt Borralho and hurt his gas tank to the body, but if he throws enough up the middle attacks, Borralho's going to think, hey, I can't just shoot for takedowns against this guy unless I do eat one.
And again, Magomedov fought good level competition with the PFL. He lost in the $1 million fight against Luis Taylor. He went back on the regional scene with EMC, gets a win over Slavisa Simonovic, who was making his pro MMA debut. He's a 40-65 Bosnian boxer. and you had a first round 47-second Kimura win for Magomedov. His next time out, he took on one Cezarish Kejic over at KSW 57. He gets a win there, gets it by finish, and then he blasts Dustin Stoisfus. Again, Magomedov, underdog in this role. Borralho is favored. I think the weirdest fight Borralho's had in the UFC is fight against, you know who it is, Mahmoud Muradov, where Muradov was going for takedowns. Borralho wanted to strike with a really good boxer. It was just an oddball fight. Borralho ends up getting the win. He is, again, favored in the matchup. We have a look at the Topology votes, Matt. I'm going to let you set it because I feel like the odds are down on Magomedov because he looked bad against Strickland in the second round, and he lost by finish. And I think the fans are going to have Borralho, but I'll let you set that.
I think like 85% for the natural.
I'll say over 85%. Oh boy. 1,298 total votes, 90% Borralho, 31% by decision, 51% by submission. For the 10% that are Magomedov, 55% by knockout. Borralho's fast and loose with his striking. We haven't seen it as much in the UFC, but if you watch his tape on the regional scene, you'll see it. He also, don't forget it, 2021 Dana White's Contender Series, had to get 2 wins. The first one over their guy, now Bellator's guy, but their guy, Canadian, Aaron Jeffrey, wasn't good enough. So I do have Caio Borralho in this fight because I think, again, collapse the distance, get the takedown early like your Jalton Almeida, and make it nasty against Abus Magomedov. But the one thing that I said earlier, Magomedov at ATT for this camp with a guy that he was supposed to fight, Aliaskhab Hezriev, training with him, Magomed Karimov, and Kairula Karatuliev, a guy who hasn't fought all that much but has a winning record. But again, those two guys, Hezriev and Magomed Karimov, are going to set you up well for a fight against Caio Borralho.
They definitely will, but I do tend to have Borralho in the matchup. Probably by decision, though. I do think it's going to be hard to go out there and get a stoppage, even though he is such a talented fighter. But I bring it up on purpose. If Magomedov wins this fight, it's going to put him right back into that spot he was before the Sean Strickland fight. He's probably not fighting Sean Strickland in the main event of a fight night, because that would be weird for the middleweight title. But he could fight a Brad Tavares next. Just one of those guys who's in the mix and always has been. And I honestly think that for both guys. Whoever wins this fight, I could see them getting like a Brad Tavares type name. Because Drinkus Duplessis is a guy who I was thinking of, but he's far too high up in the division, and that'd be a bad matchup
He's
for
popping
Borralho.
his pants off and wearing a South
He's
America
getting wild in
underpants
France.
with his buddy, in front of the Eiffel Tower. And when it comes down to it, Matt, the UFC, they don't do gimmicky fights. That's why Francis Ngannou went away, and that's why Abus Magomedov got a main event based on merit and talent alone. So, Matt, in this one, both of us going with Brazil's Caio Borralho to get the win. Some big-time fights left on this main card. Matt, I know that we're excited about that main event. Jalton Almeida taking on Derek Lewis. You're not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, we always say. Let's get into it.